Alrighty, welcome everyone to the Mind, Body, Spirit Virtual Summit 2018. Today, it's probably not the last one you'll listen to, but I'm recording my last interview with Reverend Darrell Jones. So we're saving the best for last. So I'm going to introduce you guys to Darrell first, and then we'll get into the questions. So Reverend Darrell Jones has been working with individuals and groups to support their spiritual growth since 2008. In 2015, he launched an online ministry named Soul Gym to support the virtual world with the exercises of meditation, prayer, and study. Most recently, as co-head of teaching, training, and general manager, Darrell helped launch a new wellness studio in Chicago named Chill Meditation and Massage in April 2017. Regardless of if he is working in the spiritual or secular domain, Darrell's purpose and mission is to support anyone in the practice of meditation as a tool to live in better relationship with the stresses of their lives. So welcome, Darrell.
Thank you so much for having me, Abby.
Of course. So first, to start off, I'd love for our listeners to hear your story and how you got into the wellness, meditation, spirituality space.
Sure. So it's not very sexy. I, in my early mid-20s, was married and found myself moving towards separation and divorce. And didn't quite know what to do about that, and found myself questioning a lot of myself and what it meant to be me and what is my life all about. And I was in traditional talk therapy and found myself exploring a little bit more of my spirituality and my background growing up as a son of a minister. I'd kind of pushed a lot of that away, but was starting to welcome that back into my life, but wasn't really finding things in the more traditional religious and spiritual communities that I was familiar with. So I started doing a lot of reading, a lot of online research, and one of the things that really was presented as a tool to betterment of self was a practice of meditation and self-awareness. So as I went through the process and the experience of divorcing and stepping back into life in a new way and redefining myself, that became a big part of my practice. And as a result, it just put me into connection with a community that I hadn't been a part of before. And that led to helping launch a spiritual community in 2003 called the Bodhi Spiritual Center. And in that space is where I really delved deeper into metaphysical study, into some of the spirituality of psychology with like Carl Jung. I started looking into some other world religions. I grew up Christian, but I started looking at Islam. I started looking at the mysticism of Judaism. I started looking at the Baha'i tradition. I started looking at Taoism and Buddhism and quantum physics even.
Yes.
And this idea about consciousness, that what we become more aware of is then what we become more aware of. And when we're aware of ourselves and what we're doing and what we're choosing, then we have a powerful place to continue in the direction we're going or to turn the corner and go another way.
Sure.
And so then my study carried me through almost like another undergrad. I call it a spiritual undergrad. I studied 4 years and then took an exam to be called what's in this tradition that I studied in called a spiritual practitioner, which is kind of like a lay minister.
Sure.
So I was working with the community. I was praying with people. I wasn't necessarily counseling in the traditional position, but I was working with folks on how to support them in really cultivating a practice and exercise, a regular prayer life. And then I found myself in grad school at the Holmes Institute of Consciousness Studies, and that's when I became a minister and also received my master's in consciousness studies. And that really is what widened my desire to understand the practices around the planet, whether they be secular in the scientific world, in sociology and psychology, or in the religious and spiritual realm. But regardless of what the religion was, I really wanted to understand the different systems that people had created. And the one practice that I saw in some way, shape, or form, regardless of the tradition, was some practice of meditation, of getting still and creating a little bit of space to what I say today is to connect to ourselves. Some people may say to connect to God, to the universe, to a vision, to a mission,
Sure.
which all of those things are great, but it's ultimately really connecting back to ourselves and our heart and mind.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I love to hear people's background because I think for most people it's not sexy,
Right.
but it's like real life. Like almost everyone, I would actually say probably everyone I think I've interviewed for this summit, they found themselves in the wellness, holistic, spiritual, healing, whatever world because of a personal reason.
Sure.
You know, it wasn't just like, I knew from the time I was in second grade, I wanted to be a spiritual practitioner. Like,
Right.
that's not usually how it goes. It's like
Yeah.
life happens and it catapults you into that. So
Yeah.
I love
Absolutely.
that. Okay, can you define meditation?
Sure. At its most basic level, meditation is a practice or an exercise of paying attention in the present moment. That particular definition is distilled out of the tradition, what we now call mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
is a secular word that came out of the Buddhist tradition, but it's really about being present. And there's so many different ways and styles of anchoring our attention in the present moment. But to just kind of give a blanket, generalized definition, meditation is the practice of being present.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And so when did you start meditating and what was meditating like for you
Sure.
at that point? Because I'm sure it's very different now.
Yeah. Well, I think all of us meditate and don't realize it. There's so many either like definitions or just maybe like for me, although I don't have any much hair on my head now, I always associated meditation with monks and
Right.
like Eastern, kung fu, and grew up watching a lot of movies, and I actually took Taekwondo as a child,
Right.
and there was meditation as a part of that practice where you had to get still and be in
Yeah.
intention before you went out to do any sort of sparring.
Right.
And people find themselves meditating in nature when they're standing at the peak of a mountain or standing at the edge of the ocean, and they take a deep breath in and out, and they're really just kind of taking in, and they're in that space of awe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've been meditating most of my life as a person who loves to be out in nature. Formally, though, I think it was as I started reading some books by Bob Proctor, Wayne Dyer,
Mm-hmm.
that all talked about finding some way of getting aware of what's going on in the projector of your mind. What is it that you're casting out into the world?
Mm-hmm.
And so initially, it looked like all guided meditation. I was reading books, and they might have things that you could, create yourself, or finding recordings, buying CDs. At the time, this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. But when I helped open the Bodhi Spiritual Center in 2003, I was working as a sound engineer. And so at the beginning of every service there, they had about 20 minutes of meditation, and usually started with a little bit of light music to help kind of just settle the room. And then it would go to silence,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be partially guided. And then towards the end, so everyone knew it was time to come out of this stillness, I would bring the music back up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was sitting there for about 10, 15,
Right.
16 minutes doing nothing. And then finally I said, I'm going to join them. And I set
Right.
a little, vibrating alarm on my clock on my phone so it didn't disturb anyone. And I started sitting in practice, and I just would sit there and breathe in and out. And, I had to keep my eye on the time. So that was something that focused my attention a little
Uh-huh.
bit, keep me present.
Right.
And then I started experimenting more at home on my own.
Nice. Awesome. So for our listeners that maybe don't practice meditation regularly or aren't really familiar with it, why is it important for someone to start a meditation practice?
Sure. I like to teach meditation as a tool or a practice for mental and emotional wellness. It is something and can be something that is done in the in relationship to one's spirituality or religion. But I like to remove as much of that as possible and really make it about just a life practice towards wellness, and ask people, usually in a workshop setting, how many of you brush your teeth? And thankfully, everyone raises their hand. And I say, why do you brush your teeth? And we finally get, distill some of the answers down to this idea of maintaining oral hygiene or oral health.
Yep.
And then I follow up that question with, well, what do you do to maintain your mental and emotional health? And usually I get grimaces on people's faces.
Yep.
They don't.
Right.
And so that is why I think it's important for people to meditate, because it is an exercise and a practice that is like brushing your teeth every day. It does a little bit of something to help maintain your mental and emotional health. And as opposed to, most of us don't wait until we get a cavity to start brushing our teeth. We don't just brush our teeth once on Monday morning and go, yeah, I'm good for the week.
Right.
We know that we need to do a little bit of something every day to maintain the current health state that we're in. And if we need to improve it, then there's more that we have to do. We have to floss. We have to use a certain mouthwash or whatever it may be.
Right.
So it's the same with meditation. It's a practice that can really do something to benefit our mental, emotional, and I believe physiological state of wellness. And at a base level, to just do a little bit every day helps maintain something. And then there's exercises and classes and retreats and so many different things that you can do to expand and increase one's wellness and health mentally and emotionally with the practice as well.
Yeah. I love that. You always have the best analogies. But it's so important because people get it. And then they have that aha moment that's like, oh.
Yeah.
And I even, Carrie and I use that example with dentists and brushing the teeth for chiropractic as well. And it's such a perfect example. I'm like, dentists have it figured out, man. They're a completely preventative practice. And everyone gets that. So it's the same thing for your mental health. It's the same thing for your spine and getting adjusted and all that. You shouldn't just go to the back doctor when you have a disc herniation.
Right.
You should get that stuff straightened out. So
get adjusted for all the weird bumps of your day.
Totally. I love that. So you spoke to also meditation, not just being mental, emotional, but also physiologic. And I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit.
Sure. So the idea that a lot of the physiological challenges that some people experience stem from mental and emotional stress, whether it be worry, doubt, fear, concern. Those are the things that can trigger higher blood pressure. Those are the things that can increase our heart rate. Those are the things chronically that just suppress our immune system. And so what happens physiologically when we meditate, and there's been over 30 years now of research of the not only the mental, the neurological, but also the physiological happenings for people who meditate regularly, is that the blood pressure literally decreases. So for those who are experiencing high blood pressure or anxiety, meditation is something that helps the body get a little bit of a break, a little bit of a rest. And so that's, at its most basic level, physiologically, that's one of the things that meditation can improve with. I've seen a handful of studies that have looked at the sugar levels in the blood when someone meditates, and I'm sure people can always argue one way or the other, but there have been a few studies that are now leaning in the direction that meditation can help the body in its processing of sugars. So those who may be somewhere on the spectrum of having, a relationship with diabetes or just sugar spikes them significantly, that meditation literally helps the blood process sugars better. I'm trying to think, there was one other, it's escaping me right now, physiologically. Oh, just in terms of heartbeat, the heart rate. So to calm the heart rate, in moments of anxiety and moments of high stress, oftentimes we go into that fight or flight space. So the process of meditating then becomes this immediate response. With that deeper inhale and exhale, we're welcoming more oxygen into the body. Therefore, the heart and everything else doesn't have to work so hard because it has more, the oxygen level has increased.
Right.
The thing opens up a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think, like you said, people will always argue, blah, blah, the evidence, whatever. But the bottom line is the cause of almost everything that's killing us these days, part of it at least, is absolutely linked to stress.
Yes. 100%.
So if you can apply a practice daily, even for a few minutes, that can help lower stress, there's no way you can say that it's not affecting your health.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's so important. And, of course, how Dr. Carrie and I both practice, that for people to have a tool that they're utilizing every day to help maintain their stress levels and maintain their wellness is so important, because it can't just be whenever you go to your counselor, whenever you go to your chiropractor, your nutritionist, or whoever that you're working on it. To have something every day is like so important.
Yeah.
I even saw a study. Have you seen this study with, oh man, I can't even remember where I saw this. So this is like horrible. I'm not going to cite it at all. But breathing, like the good belly, diaphragmatic breathing, actually helps alkalinize the body.
Mm.
So that's even like a step further. Like we've all heard, like you want to be alkaline to help prevent cancer and less acidity and less inflammation, all that. And I had a mentor, like in chiropractic school, that he said he's basically like, people that don't breathe well, he's like, you really can't get them healthy.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, like that's such a big deal. Like if we're just chest breathing and in that like fight or flight response, like you said all the time, it's like literally making us acidic.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So just this past week, my mother had total knee replacement.
Yeah.
And, as you know, anytime someone has significant surgery in that way and they find themselves bedridden, they've been laying down on their back, they have to do those spirometers, I think they're called, where you deep inhale to try to keep fluid from building up in the lungs, so that pneumonia doesn't manifest. And I was sitting there watching my mom, take these deep breaths in and out. And to your point, I remember this was way before Dr. Carrie and I met. I did another health talk with a colleague of yours, and we were both talking about inflammation separately. Yeah. He was talking about inflammation in the body, and I was talking about inflammation in the mind.
Right.
How the practice of meditation does that. But we ended up coming together. It was 2 workshops at the same time. People were like, I want to go see him. I want to talk to you. So we came together, did a joint talk, and we still focused on this idea of inflammation.
Yes.
And found that there were connections physiologically with that deep breath, that it literally allows toxins, it allows things to be released from the body that if they're normally not moved, and in that space of stagnation, so if you think of water, right? Water that doesn't move, it just sits and pooled. Eventually it starts to get algae, things fall in it, and it's stagnant. But water that's moving, it's cleaner. It doesn't hold on to toxicity. It works with the system around it. And I think that's the same thing with our breath. If it's only going so far, there's a part of our lungs and our diaphragmatic breathing system that does not expel things that are toxins to us.
Right.
And so that deep breath is, it's literally a lifesaver.
Totally. Well, and I think even you can take that into Chinese medicine and acupuncture as well. Like the breath is what moves your life force, your chi.
Yes. Yes.
So then that's where, everything in acupuncture is helping with stagnation of energy. So if you're not even breathing or moving in that way, you're stuck somewhere. Yeah.
I find that a lot of so the work that I'm doing now is very much in the corporate realm, out of the more spiritual side of life in the secular realm. And most of the people that I work with are sitting at desks throughout the day, which I do myself.
Yep.
But when we're in that space, oftentimes we're a little hunched over. I have my computer lifted up, but at work it's down on a table, or people are looking down at a phone, and they're collapsing on their lungs, and they're not really getting a great breath in, and they're spending 7+ hours in that position throughout the day. So their body literally is not getting all that it can throughout the day. And then people wonder why they feel sluggish and weird and dopey and not so great.
That's a great point, because I think, at least in my box chiropractor world, we always think of that as like postural, like you're ruining your spine by sitting like that. But that's a great take on that with the breath. You can't, like, you're so right. You can't even breathe.
Yeah.
In that posture either. Awesome. Okay, so we have to speak to this, because this is a big thing. Like, I hear, and I'm sure you hear all the time, is people are like, meditation is like a religion or whatever, or praying. So can you kind of clear up that whole thing for us?
Sure. So without a doubt, meditation, I think, thousands of years ago, grew out of spiritual traditions, at least in terms of any formal practice.
Yeah.
But fast forward millennia to today, meditation takes place everywhere. And meditation does not inherently mean that you are practicing a specific religion. There is always going to be dogma. There is always going to be philosophy, theology, or doctrine with anything. And that's even in the realm of science, right? There's a certain belief system. There's a certain way that the physical science, as opposed to chemical, as opposed to biological, as opposed to quantum physics, all of them operate a little bit with a different viewpoint, literally, of the body and the world. And so along with that comes a certain philosophy or dogmatic position of this is what we see, this is the way we relate to the world. So without a doubt, meditation can be connected to any of those, but it in of itself, it's just an exercise. It's just a practice. I am a big proponent and supporter of John Kabat-Zinn, who was, we could say, the grandfather of American meditation or American mindfulness practice. He's the one 35 years ago that started mindfulness-based stress reduction in the clinical setting. So he was practicing meditation in the realm of Buddhism, but then he said, hey, he worked in hospitals in the University of Massachusetts, in particular with pain patients, and said, you know, I've noticed in my own personal life that when I have physical pain, when I have emotional pain, when I have psychological angst, if I meditate, something happens to quell that. I wonder if we could take that into the clinical setting and work with pain patients and see what happens. And lo and behold, they found, you know, they did test groups and the actual scientific method. They found that there were patients that were having their pain medication could be reduced, if not completely let go of. Wow. So from that space of looking at it as strictly just a practice and exercise towards health, without a doubt, it is not necessarily about a meditation about a religion. And some people say, oh, I meditate because I pray, which I can say, yes, you know, they can be synonymous, but I do believe they are different practices.
Right.
One of the ways that I like to think of prayer, because I do it myself, is that prayer is directive, right? We are speaking a word intentionally unto a life force, a law, God, whatever you may believe. But in the space of meditation, we're more in a state of receptivity. We are listening, we're observing, we're digesting, we're welcoming, we're inviting. And that's a little bit of a different way of being, a different energy, a different mindset. And so, again, you can connect that to religion, but by no way, shape, or form is it specifically about a specific religion, or does it have to be connected to any spirituality at all?
Totally. It could be as simple as 2 minutes every morning, you focus on your breath.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's it. Yeah.
And that's it.
Awesome. So a lot of people say that they've tried meditation and they can't do it because they can't shut their mind off.
Yes.
So I'd love for you to talk about how to get around that.
Yes.
What the real deal is.
Throwing up that lob. That is one of the biggest.
That's the biggest thing.
It's the biggest challenge and it's the biggest misconception that most of us walk around with. I've been meditating for 15 years and I still have to remind myself that
Right.
the goal of meditation is not about stopping the mind.
Yes.
If you think about it again, just functionally, neurologically, we don't want the mind to shut down because the mind is what's coordinating everything.
Right.
Right? And so to that, there's always going to be data that we're taking in. There's always data that's beneath the surface that we're processing. Just like a computer has the programs running in the background that you don't see, there's so many thoughts and feelings and ideas and wonderings that are happening in the background as we move throughout our day that we're not really paying attention to because we're focusing on work or we're talking to someone or we're eating a sandwich or whatever.
Right. Which is so crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Also.
Absolutely.
Like, that's trippy.
It's very true. I mean, studies, the number continues to increase, and I think it's partially just because of the nature of our technology. But at one point in time, they said we think about 60,000 thoughts a day. Then studies showed we were thinking 80,000 thoughts. Then it was 100,000 thoughts. And most of those, 10 to 20%, we're only aware of. The rest of it's happening beneath.
Yeah.
So the challenge that people have when they move into meditation, it can, even though you're doing nothing, even though you're not stretching anything physically in your body, even though you're not doing anything really, right. It can be this painful process because all of a sudden you get this flood of these other tens of thousands of thoughts that are happening in the background
right.
that you weren't aware of. But the goal is to not stop that, right? We don't have an off valve behind our ear that we can just shift. The goal of meditation is simply to be present, but to have an exercise that puts us in powerful relationship with our thinking. The analogy or the image that I, again, like to teach with is to think of standing at the edge of a highway, or if you're here in Chicago, standing at the edge of Lakeshore Drive. And if you are right at the edge of the road, at the yellow line, cars are going to be whizzing by at about 70 miles an hour, maybe even faster. And if you were to keep your body at the edge of the highway, it would take a lot of physical fortitude and mental and emotional fortitude, because each time a car begins to approach you, you're going to be in a space of fight or flight. Your muscles are going to tense up. You're mentally going to have to say, I'm not going to move, I'm not going to move. And emotions are going to be rising and falling between fear and release, fear and relaxation, fear and relaxation. So it's exhaustive to stay in that space, to stay so close to the edge of the highway. But if you were to step back 10 feet, 15 feet, or even 20 feet from the edge of the highway, the cars don't stop moving. They're still going, whizzing by between 70 and 80 miles per hour. But all of a sudden you have some space, and then you see a car that you're like, oh my gosh, that's the one I saw in the commercial. I really want to test drive that. And you've got a different relationship with the traffic that's going by. You're not right on top of it, and it's not consuming you. You don't have to be so intense. That's what we attempt to do, or invite people into a relationship with their thinking. That instead of being on top of it, where you have to control every thought, where you have to understand every thought, where you have to be able to compartmentalize everything, it's just creating a little bit of space and allowing the thoughts, the feelings, and emotions to come and rise into awareness, but then also giving them space to fall away. So a lot of students that I work with actually have an exhale and a visible, visceral relaxation that happens on their face if they're coming to take a class for the first time in meditation. And I tell them the goal is not to turn your mind off. It's not, give yourself license to think in your meditation today. They go, oh, really?
Thank you.
The thing that's beautiful, though, is that there are fleeting and passing moments where it seems like there is nothing happening. And that's really then had the experience of a true release, a true let go, a true surrender to needing to control anything. But what often happens, at least in my personal experience, as soon as I realize I'm in that space of like nothingness, I go, oh my God, I'm thinking. Oh, I'm thinking about that.
Right.
Of thinking again, and then I take a couple of deep breaths and things slow down. So
Well, and I think it's so important for people to like hear that from someone like you, because you've been practicing meditation for so long, and it's like, even for you, you're not in this just like monk nothing land for 20 minutes. Like I think the perception out there is like you can't master meditation unless you're the perfect Zen master or whatever.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. Meditation, if you do take it back to its spiritual roots, the container for where it happened were in monasteries, were in caves, were on, these ascetic places where people removed themselves from society.
Right.
Right? They were wearing clothes that were simple. They were eating food that was just very basic. They were choosing to not engage with the technology of their day so that they could have a more profound relationship with themselves and with nature. Mm-hmm. And so to bring that practice out of that ascetic kind of simplistic life into our modern day and to have the same expectation that we would be monk-like,
right.
It's just completely foolish.
Right.
Not that we aren't all foolish all the time and thoughts like that and hopes and dreams, but to be, like I am a meditation instructor, but I'm also a general manager. I have to process payroll. I have to give praise, and I also have to have hard conversations with employees. I have to work with difficult customers in our store.
Right.
I have to, remember to take my dog for a walk because his legs are crossed and he hasn't peed for 8 hours.
Right.
All of those stresses are still there and provide themselves with worry, concern, and frustration. But what I have found is that out of a regular meditation practice, there has been this muscle that has developed that shows up in those moments of stress. The stress doesn't go away, but just like the cars and the highway, the stress is there. It's very strong, but I'm not right on top of it.
Yeah.
I can step back and find myself empowered to choose, how do I want to be in relationship to this stress right now?
Yeah.
And to be honest, some days I'm like, I'm going to freak out right now because I don't know what I do. And
right.
I'm going to freak out, and then I come back to my breath. I get really present again, and I go, why did I freak out? Because I'm telling myself this story about what they're going to do and what they think is going to happen, and that's not actually what's happening in front of me.
Yes, totally. Yeah, it allows you to be like an observer of what's going on instead of just reactive all the time. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I'd love for you to give our listeners, what are a couple different ways? Because I think that's great. They learn about meditation. They're like, I want to start a practice, but now where do I even start?
Yeah.
So what are a couple easy ways people can start to integrate that into their life?
Sure. You made a point that I think is more critical than any understanding of meditation, is that you have to practice it. Mm-hmm. The amount of people that I have talked to, they're like, oh man, meditation is so cool. I read this article and blah, blah, blah. I saw this other post. I saw this blog. Right. It's really, really cool. Meditation's awesome. I'm like, when was the last time you meditated? So to have the experience of meditation is that's it. And to preface before I say, some styles or ways that people can begin to practice, is that I want to emphasize the word practice. That oftentimes we want to move towards a space of mastery, which I am all about, personal mastery and self-mastery. But to think of meditation as not something that you're trying to master, it's just something that you are practicing regularly. Mm-hmm. To go back to that analogy of brushing the teeth. It's like, do you ever master brushing your teeth?
Right.
I don't know. You brush your teeth every
Yes.
So the same is true with meditation. It's just something that you start to do. And there's going to be some days when your schedule is hectic and chaotic and you can only get 2 minutes in. And there's going to be other days when you can do 20. Time is, especially when you're beginning a meditation practice, I believe the quantity of time is less as important as the quality of your practice. So if you can only do 1 minute, literally all you can find in your day is 1 minute to meditate, but you are fully present and you're listening and you're just breathing in and feeling that air. Feel it expand your lungs and then exhale. That wasn't even a minute. That was just maybe 10 seconds. If that's all you have to start, that is brilliant.
Right.
Most meditation forms and styles, again, are specific to different traditions, but almost all of them begin with breathing. Mm-hmm. The reason being is that the breath is something that everyone, regardless of where they grew up, where they came from, how much money they have or don't have, everyone breathes.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows how to breathe. But rarely, to that point of our discussion earlier, rarely are we really conscious in taking those deep breaths. So to look at meditation at its most basic and fundamental thing is just taking conscious deep breaths in and out. So if someone was to only take 3 slow inhales and exhales to begin, that's one practice. There are tons of apps that I recommend. The one that I personally use is called Insight Timer. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I like that over some of the other ones is that it has a myriad of providers. So Headspace is beautiful. Calm is amazing. There's one called Zen, and they're great, but it's only one voice, and they tend to follow a specific path, which for those people who need more of that narrow specificity in order to develop a habit, that may be beneficial for them. What I find is Insight Timer, there's hundreds of providers, and so you get different voices, you get different styles and practices so that you can start to learn what you like and what you don't like. Yep. Because, one meditation does not fit all.
Sure. Well, I use Insight Timer too, and I like that you can even just not do guided and set it to the sound of like rainwater for 2 minutes, and boom, it's a timer and done. And you can just, like you said, focus on your breath or whatever.
So to use an app, you can also just simply use your clock or your watch on your phone and set it for 2 minutes to count down, and have a nice little soft alarm go off when it's over. Mm-hmm. And then there's always going to classes. The place that I help launch Chill, we offer classes 7 days a week. If you can get to downtown, yoga classes, I think, are beautiful as well. It engages the body, but it also engages you in breathing, and it is a practice of being present. Mm-hmm. But if someone's wanting to do a personal practice on their own, I would say don't do any more than 2 to 5 minutes a day. And the reason being, oftentimes people think they need to do at least 20, they need to do at least 30, and depending upon the teacher and who you talk to, there's always going to be differing opinions. Mm-hmm. My desire and hope, and what I have found, is that when people start off trying to do 20 to 30 to even 45 minutes and they've not had that practice as a part of their life, they may be successful for a short while, but it's hard to maintain.
Yeah.
And the goal is, back to that idea of brushing your teeth, we're just starting to get a habit, a regular practice, almost a default way of being, so that when you wake up in the morning, within the first hour, there's this setting within you that goes, oh my gosh, I need to meditate. Mm-hmm. But that will happen only through that repetitive nature. And if it starts with just 2 to 5 minutes to get that pathway of consciousness into your being, I find that people are much more successful than if they just jump in and do a longer meditation on a regular basis.
Yes. Well, I think we spoke earlier, it's like building almost a muscle, right? So I feel like it's similar to exercise. Mm-hmm. Like it's better for you to do some movement every day, even if it's for 10 minutes, then on the weekend you go out and, run a marathon.
Right.
And don't get all amped up right away. I see people all the time, like New Year's hits, they're all excited about exercise and like, I'm going to go to the gym 7 days a week for 3 hours. It's like, okay, maybe you'll do that for 2 weeks right. And then you're going to be a disaster. So do you feel like it's more effective for people then to just do 2 minutes a day every single day versus like a couple times a week?
I do. In terms of creating some mental triggers for people, oftentimes in a class, I'll invite people to close their eyes and see the handle of the door that they turn to leave their house or apartment to go to work or school, mm-hmm. into their life. And I say, if you touch that and you haven't taken 3 deep breaths, then before you open the door, if you do nothing else but just breathe in and out 3 times consciously, slowly, let that be the beginning of your practice every day.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
But also to literally connect it to brushing your teeth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most people are going to do that in the morning at some point in
Right.
time. They do it in the evening. What if right after you brush your teeth in the morning, you sit down, you just got fresh breath? Why don't you get a fresh consciousness
Yep.
and take 2 minutes, whether you're sitting on your bed, sitting on the toilet, sitting on the floor, laying down on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
standing even. There's no place that you cannot meditate.
Yeah.
That I have found. I meditate on elevators, going up to business meetings, taking 30 seconds on that ride up to get really present and grounded.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, 2 minutes a day. But if you do it twice a day, like you're brushing your teeth,
Right.
I think people will have an immediate experience. Every single meditation that you do, physiologically, you're going to have some sort of shift in your heartbeat, some sort of shift in your blood pressure. There will be a shift in your neurology in that it's almost like, everyone loves the word disruptor today, like things that disrupt the norm.
Right.
Meditation is a practice of disruption because we have default patterns of thinking that we go into. When we go to work, there's a certain way we always are. When we're with our loved one, we're sitting at dinner, there's probably a certain way that we're there. When we're walking our dog or talking to our kids or whatever it may be, we go into default pattern, and meditation becomes this very loving, gentle disruptor to that and allows and welcomes new patterns to develop in our neurology.
Yeah.
That's that idea of neuroplasticity. There are studies that have shown now that people meditate regularly, the actual gray matter is denser in their brain than those who don't.
Mm-hmm.
So more surface area in the brains of meditators for neural pathways to continue to develop.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what is your personal favorite way to meditate?
I don't know if it's because my original schooling and background is as a musician, but I love incorporating music and sound.
Mm-hmm.
Not music with words, because then oftentimes there's a story that's being told, and so then you go down kind of a pathway of thinking. But whether it's sounds of flute, you mentioned the sounds of rain, especially in urban environments where there can be lots of distracting sounds, it kind of becomes a bit of a buffer. So I love to just sit. I have a cushion. Sometimes I sit on my couch. Sometimes I sit on a chair. This morning, Dr. Carey and I, before we started our day, we were sitting in our little breakfast nook after we ate. And I said, hey, you want to meditate? So I pulled up Insight Timer, and there was one, the title of it was like Just This Day or something. And so the guy kept saying, just this day, what if you did this? Just today, what if you did that? And it was this practice of breathing in and out and just contemplating, what am I going to choose today? And it was 10 minutes long, and it was wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I always think how different the world would be if kids were taught to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're saying, with brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
Like it's just you grow up, you wake up, you breathe for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
I wish that I could pull up on my screen right now one of my nephews, and he hasn't really done a whole lot of meditation with me, but he obviously was introduced to it in some way.
Right.
And I think it was maybe 3 years ago, he was really into dancing. He still is now, but he was actually in troops and went to, I called them competitions, and he was doing hip hop. He was like, no, Uncle Darrell, it's a battle. And I was like, oh. But before,
are you talking about Sam?
Yeah, I'm talking totally. For one of his battles, his mom took a picture of him sitting out in the lobby of this hall, and he was sitting with his legs crossed and his hands in that kind of traditional.
Seriously?
And no one else was doing it. He just chose to do it himself. And he had this soft little smile on his face, and just breathing in and out. And Joey asked him, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just getting ready for my dance. So
that's awesome.
I have a lot of parents ask, how soon can you start meditating with children? And I believe it's the sooner the better. If you think about children that grow up in households with multiple languages, they don't wait until they go into school to start speaking different
Right.
language, they just start speaking different languages to them.
Right.
And to me, meditation can be the equivalent of speaking another language, of being able to speak to the stress in particular in our life in a different way. So the expectation of what meditation looks like has to shift significantly with children, especially younger children.
Yeah.
Even if it's just, again, 1 or 2 breaths, if they're a toddler, get them to sit on your on your lap and say, mommy or daddy, we're going to sit here. And we're just going to take a couple of deep breaths in. And kids actually love it.
Right.
You can present it as almost like a game. I've done some summer camps with teenagers, and today the stress of, like, I think our generation, maybe that hit around 15 into early adulthood, that stress continues to find itself younger and younger and younger.
Yeah.
So I was working with kids between the ages of 11 and 15, and they took to it like water. I mean,
Totally.
that space of being able to breathe and not have an agenda was really, really great for them. So kids can meditate, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Start them as soon as you can.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure there's a lot of resources out there too. And like, I remember years ago we did that event at the bookstore with kids.
Yeah.
This is forever ago.
Yeah.
But I remember there were a couple of amazing children's books that like taught them about meditation.
There's so many. I mean, I wish I had a list ready right now in my head, but I don't. But if you were to Google children's meditation books, there's so many out today.
Yeah.
And just like any book, there's going to be some that you like and some that you don't.
Right.
But it offers teachers and parents a way of not necessarily needing to be a master of meditation themselves.
Right.
To just read a story that has a theme that may actually invite them to practice in some way. So.
Totally. So I'm more curious about this question for myself, but I'm sure our listeners too. Okay. What is the longest period of time you've meditated?
Okay. The longest period of time that I've meditated is 6 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. I was, as a part of my schooling, we had at the beginning and the end of our school year, we would do a retreat where we would, we had normal classroom study, but then we did these long weekend retreats. And part of it was to get us into not only building community as students, but getting to practice. And we were required to do 4 to 6 hour solo meditations.
Wow.
So that didn't necessarily look like me just sitting in a room by myself for 6 hours. I was lucky enough the retreat was taking place in the foothills of the Rockies, and the weather was amazing. So sitting outside
in nature,
so my eyes were closed for probably a good 2 hours, and my eyes were open, and had some weird kind of trippy experiences with nature. And people talk about that kind of like weird woo-woo side, but when you slow down enough, it is almost like you can communicate with the entire planet. You hear and notice things that you normally wouldn't when you're just walking or driving by something. So, but yeah, 6 hours is the longest.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Did you feel like it went by fast because
of
like the place you were in? And
I did.
You weren't like, oh man, when is this over?
No, I was freaked out though. I mean, to be completely honest, because I think the longest I've probably done up to that point was probably between 45 minutes to an hour.
Right. Wow.
And which, felt long in and of itself.
Sure.
And then I was like, oh my God, 6 hours. I was like, wait a minute. Some people just go to work for 6 hours. So I'm going to be meditating as long as I'm going to be at work
all day. Yeah.
But it didn't feel too crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'd love to know, what are a couple of books on meditation you would recommend people start out with?
There's two books that I'm reading right now. One is called Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn. And I think it's a beautiful book because, I'm reading it right now as a practitioner of 15 years, and I'm still being reminded of things about my practice reading this book. And it's not intended, it wasn't written for an advanced practitioner or someone who's just got more time under their belt.
Right.
It was written for people that were new to it and
Right.
trying to remove as much of the mysticism out of the practice, that he gives you a little bit of an idea of how mindfulness in particular, he brought it forward, but then he really just speaks powerfully to like sitting meditation, walking meditation,
Right.
laying down. So Wherever You Go, There You Are by John Kabat-Zinn. One of the first books that I found that I think is, right now it's probably my top 10 of specifically to coaching people through the practice of beginning a meditation practice for themselves. It's simply called How to Meditate by Pema Chodron. And I think the subtitle is How to Make Friends with Your Mind. And she has a beautiful way of writing and inviting people into the practice. And again, demystifying. I use some of her language a lot in my teaching. At the beginning of a meditation, it's the hardest time because that's where that settling and the rushing in of thoughts can. And she equates it to, like shaking a snow globe. And when you stop shaking the snow globe, the things are just whirling around. But after some time, they settle down on the floor of the snow globe. It's the same. If we think of ourselves as a snow globe, when we just talk and interact with people, we're shaking the snow globe, and meditation is we're stopping it. But we need to give settling time. We need to allow the thoughts to fall down. So yeah, she does a wonderful, wonderful way of inviting people into the practice.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear a little bit about Chill, where you work now, and the vision behind it. What goes on there?
So Chill, we opened in April of 2017. We actually started working on the project in the late fall of 2016. And the main owner is not a meditation instructor. She's not a massage therapist. We also offer chair massage there. She was working in the financial industry. She was a hedge fund manager, which is a very stressful realm to be when you're managing millions and millions of dollars for individuals and corporations and businesses. And in her travels, she was seeing meditation-like studios open up in New York and LA and thought for sure there'd be one in Chicago. Came back from one of her trips and didn't find anything. The only thing that she could find was venues out in the neighborhood. She works and lives pretty central to downtown Chicago. And there were things out in the far neighborhoods, the north and the western suburbs. And most of them were taking place in Buddhist temples, or maybe it was connected to a Friday night Shabbat service in the Jewish realm, or a prayer service in the Christian realm. And she's like, none of those were bad, but she wasn't interested in jumping into any sort of religious practice. She just wanted to calm herself. And so Chill birthed out of that because she was, I want to find a beautiful place in the city that's easy to get to for me to stretch my meditation practice. And started amassing a team. And so Chill is there to help people live more mindful lives and be in relationship to their stress. We do that with meditation classes 7 days a week, as short as 30 minutes and as long as an hour. All of it is based in the basic definition or tenet of mindfulness, to pay attention in a particular way in the present moment on purpose. And so we have classes that focus on the breath. We have classes that invite you to think. One called Insight, where it's about contemplation. We have the one called Rest, where you lay down on your back for almost 30 minutes and you don't do anything but just do a guided body scan and allow things to fall away. Our longest class is called Yoga and Meditation. It's an hour long, and love, 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 love. A lot of people love this class because it starts with movement, 30 minutes of yoga, but nothing super intense. People have taken the class that have never done yoga before. And then it ends with 30 minutes of seated meditation.
Nice.
So I think that supports some people that get a little anxious of being still for that long. It gives them something to do to kind of unwind before they sit down.
Totally.
Yeah, so that's the basic mission is to support people in cultivating a practice. And we do it in our studio, and we also go out into the community and do even later this afternoon. I'm going to a 50-year-old birthday party, and she wanted to have meditation facilitated with all of her friends.
Nice. That's awesome. It's the new trend for birthday parties also, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
Call Darrell up.
There you
for
go.
Your next party. Okay, great. So, and we will leave all the links to Chill and all of that for you guys in the notes. So you can look it up. And if you're local to Chicago, for sure, go check it out. I want to ask you a couple other fun questions.
Mm-hmm, please.
So what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, my goodness. Breathe. breathe. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think the biggest piece of advice I give to my younger self is to get present, is to, believe in yourself today and live yourself today, as opposed to try to figure out who you're supposed to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because you can't do that.
Totally. I love it. I would say it's that I think I've asked every person that question, and everyone has said some form of like chill out.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's awesome. Like that's everyone's answer. Like everything's gonna work out.
Everything's gonna be okay.
It's all good. Except actually your wife, who was like, I'd say get treated.
Sure.
Like find an applied kinesiology doctor yesterday. Yeah. To help you. Okay, and I want to know what's next for you. Like what new and exciting things are happening?
Yeah. Well, Chill is still full-time for me. And the next phase of work there, so we've been doing classes and workshops we have about 15 people that teach every week, including myself. But now we are looking at starting modules. So as opposed to a single class where people may commit to 4 to 8 weeks, focused on very specific traditions, and these modules then lead up to a training program so people can actually learn how to facilitate meditation in their own lives, whether they're a teacher or a parent, maybe someone in HR and they want to be a provider, an internal provider to their work,
sure.
Or yoga instructors that maybe want to deepen their practice and be able to take it into their classes. But yeah, so the next step is creating an actual like certificated meditation teacher program.
Nice.
And then, of course, I love to explore ways of taking it out into the community. I still want to work with police officers in Chicago. I still want to go into underserved neighborhoods and work with kids and children that are experiencing lots and lots of stress, and teach this tool of mindfulness and meditation as a way of not just coping, but transitioning into being able to be empowered to choose, be a victim to their circumstance.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so how can our listeners find and keep in touch with you?
Sure. The easiest way, if they want to meet me face-to-face, is to come to Chill. Our website is chillchicago.com. We have Instagram, chill_out_shy, CHI. I can't even remember what my personal handle is. I think it's just Darrell Jones Spirit on Instagram. And my personal ministry has kind of been a little dormant, but will be coming back later this year, souljimwisdom.org. And anyone that wants to come try a class, if they're local in Chicago to Chill, we'd love for them to come between now and the end of June. They can try any of our meditation classes, our regular weekly offerings, a complimentary one on us, MBS for Mind, Body, Spirit. 2018 MBS 2018 is a code they can use online, or they can call or stop in and use that for a complimentary class.
Awesome. So we will leave links to all that stuff that Darrell mentioned for you guys in the notes below the interview. All the links to follow them, as well as that promo code. So if you're local to Chicago or you want to come visit, you can try out a class for free at Chill, which is awesome, by the end of June. So definitely take advantage of that. All right, Darrell, thank you so much for your time.
Dr. Abby, this is a blast.
Totally. And I can't wait for this interview to go live. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it.
Yes.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.